Driven from home, he hides in a cave. But what was inside left him breathless. Ethan pounded his bare feet on the dry dirt floor as tears streamed down his dusty face. The accusations from his own father echoed in his mind like an open wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. At 9 years old, he never imagined he would be driven from home by his own parents, accused of stealing the family savings kept in the old ceramic jar. The cave on the hillside had always seemed haunted to him, but now it was his only refuge from the scorching sun of the New Mexico backlands. Entering the cool darkness, he expected to find only silence and solitude to cry out his pain. However, an orange light flickered in the back of the grotto, and when his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Ethan came face to face with a bearded man holding a candle and staring at him with equal surprise. "Who are you, boy?" asked the stranger in a hoarse voice, like someone who hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. Ethan took a few steps back, ready to run, but his legs trembled with exhaustion and fear. I just wanted to hide. I won't steal anything, I promise." The man lowered the candle and observed the boy more closely. He noticed the torn clothes, the bruised feet, and especially the red eyes from so much crying. "Hide from what? Are you running from someone?" "My father drove me out of the house," Ethan sobbed. "He said I'm a thief and that he doesn't want to see me anymore." The words came out in pieces, interrupted by crying. The man felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. "What's your name?" "Ethan. Ethan Mitchell Thompson. I live over in the village on the street above the church." The stranger let out a long sigh as if recognizing something familiar. "Mitchell Thompson," he murmured. "And your father, what's his name?" "Richard Mitchell Thompson. He works at Mr. Harold's workshop fixing carts and tools." The man in the cave sat down heavily on a rock, as if his legs could no longer hold him. The candle flickered in his hand. "My God, Richard," he whispered. Ethan wiped his nose on his shirt sleeve and moved a little closer. "Do you know my father?" "Yes, I do, boy. I've known him since he was smaller than you." The man looked at Ethan as if seeing a ghost. The same brown eyes, the same face shape, the same high forehead. "What's your full name, Ethan?" "Ethan Mitchell Thompson, but my mother calls me Ethany." "And your grandmother? Is she still alive?" "Grandma Dorothy? She went to heaven when I was 5. Why are you asking that?" The man closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a mixture of pain and relief in his gaze. Because I am your uncle, Ethan. My name is Brandon Mitchell Thompson." The boy's eyes widened, not believing what he was hearing. "Uncle Brandon, but Dad said you left a long time ago and never came back." "That's exactly what happened, my boy. I left 15 years ago and never returned. I've lived here in this cave ever since." Ethan moved closer, studying the bearded man's face. Even with all that grizzled beard and worn clothes, he could see a resemblance to his father. "Why did you leave, Uncle Brandon?" The question came loaded with the typical innocence of a child, but it hit Brandon like a stab. How to explain to that boy that he too had been driven from home, falsely accused of something he didn't do? "It's a long story, Ethan, and a painful one. I have time. I don't have anywhere else to go anyway." Brandon smiled sadly. The boy's sincerity completely disarmed him. "All right. But first, tell me what happened to you. Why did your father drive you out?" Ethan sat on a smaller rock, across from the uncle he never knew. "Yesterday morning, Mom went to the market and Dad went to work. I was playing in the backyard and then went inside to get some water. That's when I saw the jar where they keep the money was empty. And then I got worried, because there was always money in there. I thought someone had stolen it. I ran over to Mrs. Linda's house, our neighbor, to ask if she had seen any strangers around." Brandon listened attentively, hearing echoes of his own story in the boy's account. "Go on." "When I got back home, Mom and Dad had already arrived. They saw the empty jar and started yelling at me, saying it could only have been me who took the money. I tried to explain, but they didn't believe me." "And what did they think you did with the money?" Dad said I must have bought candy or given it to someone. But I swear, Uncle Brandon, I didn't take anything. When I saw the jar, it was already empty." Tears began to roll down Ethan's face again. Brandon felt his heart tighten. It was as if time had turned back 15 years and he was seeing himself in that boy. "I believe you, Ethan." "You believe me?" "Yes, I do. You know why? Because the same thing happened to me when I was 22. Ethan wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "What do you mean?" Brandon sighed and began his own story. "Your grandfather, your father's dad, left a small inheritance when he passed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a little house and a piece of land. The money was kept in a tin buried in the backyard, waiting for the right time. And what happened? One day, when I got home from work, the tin was empty. Your father, who was 17 at the time, accused me of taking it all to run away and start a new life somewhere else. But you didn't take it, right?" "No, Ethan. I would never do that. That money was sacred to me, because it was the last thing my father left. But your father was convinced it could only have been me, since I was the only one who knew where it was hidden. So who took it then?" Brandon shook his head. "We never found out, but the suspicions, the arguments, and the accusations destroyed our family. Your father said terrible things to me, said I was a thief and that I didn't deserve to carry the family name. What did you do?" "I did the same thing you did, my boy. I left home and ended up here in this cave. The difference is you're still a child and I was already an adult. I could have fought, I could have proven my innocence, but pride spoke louder." Ethan was silent for a moment, processing everything he had heard. "Uncle Brandon, why did you never go back?" "Because after a while pride turns into hurt, and hurt turns into a wall too high to climb. Every day I thought about going back, but every day I found an excuse not to." "But don't you miss your family?" The question hit home. Brandon felt his eyes fill with water. "I miss them a lot, Ethan, more than you can imagine. For 15 years I haven't hugged anyone, haven't had a proper conversation with anyone, haven't smelled my mother's cooking. Grandma Dorothy always talked about you. She said you were the best storyteller in the family and that you'd come back one day." Brandon couldn't hold back the tears. Every night for these 15 years he had dreamed of his mother's voice, her smell of coconut soap, and the loving way she treated her children. She talked about me." "Yes, she did. She kept all your things in the cedar chest, saying you'd need them one day. Mom told me that." "And she passed without seeing me again," Brandon murmured, more to himself. "Uncle Brandon, what if we went back together? Maybe now, with what happened to me, they might understand better what you went through." Brandon shook his head. "No, Ethan. Your father must be very angry with me. If I show up now, especially bringing you back, he'll think I came to cause more trouble. But Uncle, what if we find out who really took the money? Then they'll believe us." The determination in the boy's voice surprised Brandon. Even after being kicked out of the house, Ethan still had hope of proving his innocence. "And how do you think we can find that out?" "We can investigate. Mrs. Linda saw something strange these past few days. She told me her daughter Becky has been acting kind of weird lately." "Becky? I remember her. She was a tiny little girl when I lived in the village. Now she's 18 and she's always going out at night. Mrs. Linda complains that she comes home late and is spending money she doesn't have." Brandon started paying closer attention. After so many years surviving on his own, he had developed a sharp instinct for sensing when something wasn't right. "Do you think she might have something to do with the missing money?" "I don't know, Uncle Brandon, but she always had access to our house. Mum leaves the door open when she goes out and everyone in the village knows where we keep the spare key." "And where is it?" "Under the flower pot on the porch. Everyone knows because we've lent the key to neighbors lots of times." Brandon started putting the pieces together. A young woman who was spending money she didn't have, easy access to the house, and knowledge of where the family kept their savings. "Ethan, you said you went to ask Mrs. Linda if she had seen anything strange. What exactly did she tell you?" "She said she didn't see anything, but she got kind of nervous. And Becky showed up at the door asking what we were talking about." "What time did that happen?" "Around 10 in the morning. I remember because the church bell had just rung." "And what time did your parents get home?" Dad got home at noon and Mom got home right after. They must have found the empty jar almost at the same time. Brandon became thoughtful. 2 hours was enough time for the real thief to know the crime had been discovered and to prepare a story. Ethan, when you got back from Mrs. Linda's house, did you tell your parents where you had gone? Yes, I did. I told them I went there to ask if she had seen anything. And did they say anything about it? Dad said I was making up excuses and that I'd better just confess what I did with the money. Brandon shook his head. His brother still had the same explosive temper from 15 years ago, always quick to jump to conclusions. Uncle Brandon, do you think if we find out the truth, Dad will forgive me? I think so, Ethan. Your father isn't a bad man. He's just proud and stubborn. If we prove you were both accused unfairly, I'm sure he'll admit his mistake. What about you? Will you come back home? This question stirred something deep within Brandon. For 15 years he had dreamed of this moment, but now that he was faced with the real possibility, he felt afraid. I don't know, my boy. 15 years is a long time. Maybe it's too late to fix everything that's broken. It's never too late, Uncle Brandon. Grandma Dorothy always said that. Brandon smiled. That was exactly the kind of thing his mother used to say. All right, Ethan. Let's try to find out the truth, but first you need to eat something. When was the last time you ate? Yesterday morning, before all this happened. Brandon got up and went to a corner of the cave where he kept his few provisions. He came back with a piece of goat cheese and some fruit he had gathered. Eat this. Then we'll plan how we're going to investigate this story. Ethan devoured the food, only then realizing how hungry he was. As he ate, he watched curiously this unknown uncle who had been living in a cave for 15 years. Uncle Brandon, how have you managed to live out here alone for so long? It was very difficult at first, Ethan. I didn't know how to hunt, didn't know where to find clean water, didn't know which fruits I could eat, but little by little I learned. And you're not afraid of being out here alone? I'm used to it. In fact, sometimes I think I'm more afraid of going back to living with other people than of being alone. Why? Because when you're alone for a long time, you forget how to talk, how to trust someone, how to be part of a family. Ethan finished eating and moved closer to his uncle. But you're not alone now, I'm here. Brandon smiled. There was something in that boy's simplicity that was melting away 15 years of accumulated sorrow. That's true, Ethan. Now I am not alone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. During the afternoon, Brandon told Ethan how he had survived all those years. He showed him the medicinal plants he knew, the places where he collected rainwater, and the small traps he used to catch fish in the nearby stream. You're almost like a Native American, Uncle Brandon. I learned out of necessity, my boy. When you have no choice, you learn pretty fast. And you never got sick? I did, a few times. Once I caught a very bad fever and thought I was going to pass on. That's when I learned about the plants that help with healing. Who taught you? An old man who lives on a farm a few kilometers from here, old Joe from the woods. He would sometimes pass by hunting, and we started talking. He taught me almost everything I know about survival. And does he know you live here? Yes, he does. In fact, it was through him that I always got news from the village. That's how I knew you had been born, that your grandmother had passed on. Old Joe from the woods told you these things? He did. I think he felt sorry for me. Whenever he passed by, he'd bring me some news about the family. And you never asked him to take a message back? Brandon was silent for a moment. Many times I wanted to, Ethan, but I always changed my mind at the last minute. Pride is a stubborn thing. Uncle Brandon, when it gets dark, can we go to the village to investigate? Investigate how? We can hide near our old house and Mrs. Linda's house to see if anything strange happens. Brandon considered the idea. It was risky, but it might be the only way to discover the truth. It could be dangerous, Ethan. If someone sees us, it could make the situation even more complicated. But Uncle, we have to try. I can't stay here forever, and you can't keep living alone in this cave either. The boy's determination was contagious. Brandon felt an energy he hadn't experienced in years. All right, when night falls, we'll go take a look. But you have to promise you'll do exactly what I say. I promise. And if anything goes wrong, you run back here. Understood? Understood, Uncle Brandon. While they waited for nightfall, Brandon taught Ethan some survival techniques. How to make fire without matches, how to identify if a plant is poisonous, how to follow animal tracks. Uncle Brandon, you're so smart. No, Ethan, I just had to learn to fend for myself. When you have no one to help you, you develop skills you didn't even know you had. But it's still impressive you could teach these things to other people. Who would want to learn from a man who lives in a cave? I would, and I'm sure other people would too. Brandon had never thought of that. All these years he had considered himself just a fugitive from society, someone who had failed at life. He never imagined his survival skills could be useful to other people. You really think so, Ethan? I do, Uncle Brandon. You know more about nature than anyone I know. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, the two prepared for the mission. Brandon grabbed his only spare change of clothes, slightly less worn, and tried to tidy his beard as best he could. Uncle Brandon, you almost look like a normal person, Brandon laughed. It had been years since he'd laughed like that. Thanks for the compliment, Ethan. Now we look like a pair of investigators. Yeah, maybe. Batman and Robin from the backcountry. Ethan didn't understand the reference, but laughed along with his uncle. When darkness took over the backcountry, the two left the cave heading toward the village. Brandon knew every stone on that path, even in the dark. But to Ethan everything seemed different and a bit scary. Uncle Brandon, aren't you afraid of walking here in the dark? After 15 years, this path has become my home, Ethan. I know every tree, every stone, every hole. What if we encounter a dangerous animal? The only dangerous animals around here are some dogs that roam loose in the village. The rest are more afraid of us than we are of them. When they got close to the village, Brandon felt his heart race. It was the first time in 15 years he had come this close to home. He could see the yellowish light of oil lamps in the windows, hear the sound of conversations and televisions turned on. That's our house, Uncle Brandon, whispered Ethan, pointing to a simple little house with a small porch. Brandon observed the house where he had been born and raised. It looked different, with some small renovations but essentially the same. He saw a shadow pass by the window and immediately recognized his brother's silhouette. And that's Mrs. Linda's house, Ethan pointed to the neighboring house. Let's hide behind that tree. From there we can observe both houses without being seen. They positioned themselves strategically and began their watch. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Just the normal routine of any night in the village. Uncle Brandon, maybe we won't see anything today. Patience is key in an investigation, Ethan. Sometimes you have to wait a long time to see something interesting. That's when they saw a shadow moving in Mrs. Linda's backyard. It was a young person, sneaking silently toward the back of Ethan's parents' house. Uncle Brandon, look there, it's Becky. Brandon watched carefully. The young woman looked all around before heading to the house's porch. She knew exactly where the spare key was. She knows right where the key is, Ethan. And now, do we go after her? Let's wait a little to see what she does. Becky entered the house and turned on a small flashlight. By the movements of the light, it was possible to see she was looking for something. She's looking for more money, Uncle Brandon. Seems like it. Let's get a little closer, but slowly and without making noise. They moved carefully until they could position themselves under the kitchen window. They could hear Becky rummaging through drawers and cabinets. There must be more money somewhere, the young woman murmured to herself. They always keep a reserve. Did you hear that, Ethan? Whispered Brandon. I heard. She's looking for more money. That proves she was the one who took it. Easy, let's keep watching. Becky continued searching for a few more minutes, but apparently found nothing. She began to leave when she tripped on a chair, making noise. Across the street, a light came on in Mrs. Linda's house. Becky, is that you? Shouted her mother's voice. The young woman quickly turned off the flashlight and ran out the back door, forgetting to lock the house and put the key back in its place. Now's our chance, whispered Brandon. Let's go in and lock up the house before anyone notices she was here. They quickly entered the house. Brandon felt a wave of emotion stepping back into the home where he had grown up. Even in the dark, he recognized every corner, every smell, every sound. Uncle Brandon, are you okay? I am, Ethan. It's been a long time since I've been in here. Must be weird, huh? Very weird, but also very good. They locked up the house and put the key back in its place. As they were walking away, they saw Richard open the front door. "Who's there?" he shouted. Brandon and Ethan hid behind a nearby fence. Brandon's heart was beating so hard he was sure his brother could hear it. "Must have been a cat," said Richard, going back inside. "Uncle Brandon, now we have to tell them what we saw." "No, Ethan. They won't believe us. They'll think we made up this story to get out of trouble." "Then what do? "We need more concrete proof. Tomorrow we'll go look for old Joe from the woods. He can help us cook up a better plan." They returned to the cave, but Ethan was too agitated to sleep. "Uncle Brandon, at least now we know it wasn't a coincidence. Becky really took the money." "That's true. But now we need to find out why she did it and how we can prove it. Do you think she'll try again?" "Probably. People who steal once usually try again, especially if they think they haven't been caught." "What if we set a trap for her?" Brandon looked at the boy with admiration. For a 9-year-old, Ethan had some pretty clever ideas. "What kind of trap?" "We could leave some money in the place she looked today, but in a spot only she would know about. Then when she took it, we could show everyone." "Interesting, Ethan, but we don't have any money to use as bait. Couldn't old Joe from the woods lend us some?" "Maybe. We'll talk to him tomorrow." The next morning, the two set out early toward old Joe from the woods' farm. The way was long, but Brandon knew a shortcut through the mountains. During the walk, Brandon told more stories about his childhood in the village, about his parents, about what life was like before everything got complicated. "Uncle Brandon, were you happy before all this happened?" "I was very happy, Ethan. Our family was always close, hard-working, and honest. That's why it hurts so much to be accused of stealing." "Did you ever think about getting married and having kids?" "I did. Before all this happened, I was dating Mary Catherine. We even thought about getting married." "And what happened to her?" "When I was accused of stealing, she broke up with me, said she couldn't marry a thief." "She didn't believe you were innocent?" "She didn't. And I can't blame her. The whole village heard the story, and without proof of my innocence, it was natural for people to be suspicious." "Does she still live in the village?" "I don't know, Ethan. Old Joe never mentioned anything about her." When they arrived at the farm, they found old Joe fixing a fence at the back of the property. "Brandon, what a surprise!" exclaimed the old farmer. "And who's this boy?" "This is my nephew Ethan, old Joe, my brother Richard's son." Old Joe looked curiously at Ethan, noticing the resemblance to Brandon. "Ethan, the boy born 9 years ago. My goodness, how he's grown." "You know my dad?" asked Ethan. "I sure do, son. I know your whole family. I even keep telling your uncle here that he should come back home." "That's exactly what we came to talk to you about, old Joe," said Brandon. They sat on the porch of the house, and Brandon told the whole story of the last 2 days. Old Joe listened attentively, nodding his head from time to time. "So Becky is stealing from you, is she?" "It seems so, old Joe, but we need to prove it in a way that convinces everyone." "And you want me to lend money to set a trap for her?" "That's right," said Ethan. "Can you?" Old Joe smiled. "Yes, I can, son. In fact, I think I have a better idea than yours." "What is it?" asked Brandon and Ethan at the same time. "We're going to mark the money. I'll lend some bills, and we'll make little marks on them that only we will know. Then, if she really takes the money, when she spends it in the village, people will notice the marks." "Good idea," exclaimed Ethan. "That way she can't deny it." "And where are we going to put the money?" asked Brandon. "In the same place where you used to keep your savings," suggested old Joe. "In the ceramic jar. Only now it will be a trap." "But Uncle Brandon, how are we going to put the money there without my parents seeing?" "Leave it to me, Ethan. I'll talk to your parents first." "What do you mean?" Brandon's eyes widened. "Brandon, the time has come for you to go back home and tell the truth. 15 years is too long." "But old Joe, they might not believe me." "They might not believe Brandon alone," said old Joe with a clever smile. "But they'll have to believe when they see the boy was also falsely accused in the same way." "Do you think it's worth trying?" asked Brandon. Brandon, my son, if you don't try now, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering how it would have been. Ethan held his uncle's hand. I'll go with you, Uncle Brandon. If they don't believe us, at least we tried. Brandon took a deep breath. He knew old Joe was right, but 15 years of hurt don't go away easily. All right, let's try. Old Joe went to get the money and came back with some bills that he discreetly marked with a special pen. Now you two are going back to the village, and Brandon is going to knock on the door of his house. It's time to face the ghosts of the past. The walk back seemed to last an eternity for Brandon. With every step he took towards the village, he felt his heart beat faster. Uncle Brandon, are you scared? Very scared, Ethan. This might be the most frightening moment of my life. But we're together. That helps, right? It does help, my boy. Without you, I would never have the courage to do this. When they got close to the village, Brandon stopped. Ethan, what if they don't even want to talk to me? Then we'll leave and at least we tried, but I think they will want to. Why are you so sure? Because 15 years is a long time to miss someone, Uncle Brandon, and family is family. Brandon smiled. The wisdom of that 9-year-old boy was impressive. You're right, Ethan. Let's go. When they reached the door of the house, Brandon hesitated again. His hand trembled before knocking. Uncle Brandon, do you want me to knock? No, Ethan, this is something I need to do alone. Brandon took a deep breath and knocked 3 times on the wooden door. Who is it? Came Richard's voice from inside the house. It's me, Richard. Your brother Brandon. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Then slow footsteps approaching the door. When the door opened, the 2 brothers stood face to face for the first time in 15 years. Richard looked older, with graying hair and worry lines on his face. Brandon was thin, bearded, and his skin was sunburned. Brandon, whispered Richard as if he couldn't believe it. Hi, Richard. Ethan. Richard noticed his son next to his brother. What are you doing there? I told you never to come back here. Calm down, Richard, Brandon intervened. Let me explain. Explain what? That you're corrupting my son now. I'm not corrupting anyone. Ethan showed up at the cave where I live, thrown out of the house by you, accused of the same thing that happened to me 15 years ago. Richard looked confused. What cave? What story is this? Richard, I've been living in a cave in the mountains for 15 years, since the day you threw me out of the house. Brandon! A woman's voice came from inside the house. Is it really you? Carol, the wife of Richard and mother of Ethan, appeared at the door. Her eyes filled with tears immediately. My God, Brandon, where have you been all these years? Hi, Carol. I've been right nearby, but very far away at the same time. Come in, for heaven's sake, said Carol, hugging her brother-in-law. You're so thin. Richard was still in shock, processing everything that was happening. Brandon, I thought you had gone away forever. I never left, Richard. I just hid. They entered the house. Brandon looked around, seeing how everything was familiar and yet different. Carol ran to the kitchen to prepare coffee and food. My God, Ethan, where did you spend the night? Carol asked her son. In the cave with Uncle Brandon, Mum. He found me and took care of me. Cave? Richard still seemed not to understand. Brandon sat in the same chair he used to sit in when he was young. Richard, when you accused me of stealing Dad's inheritance, I didn't have the courage to fight the accusation. I left home and went to live in a cave in the mountains. But Brandon, why didn't you come back after the dust settled? Because pride is a stubborn thing, my brother, and because the hurt grew with each passing day. Carol returned from the kitchen with a tray full of food. Brandon, you need to eat. Your skin and bones. Thank you, Carol. It's been a long time since I've had a real meal. Dad, said Ethan, Uncle Brandon told me he was accused of the same thing that happened to me. He didn't steal anything either. Richard looked at his son and then at his brother. Ethan, you had all night to make up this story with him. Richard, Brandon stood up. Your son didn't make up anything, and I didn't steal anything 15 years ago, just like he didn't steal anything now. Then who stole it? We found out, Dad, exclaimed Ethan. It was Becky. Becky, Marlene's daughter? That's right, said Brandon. Last night we saw her sneaking into the house looking for more money. Richard shook his head. Now you two are making up stories together. Becky is a hard-working girl. Richard, Carol interjected, let them explain properly. Brandon told the whole story from the night before, from the moment they saw Becky sneaking up to the house until the moment she ran off. And you think I'm going to believe this crazy story? Richard, please, begged Carol. At least listen to what they have to say. All right, Carol. But how are you going to prove it? Brandon smiled and showed the marked bills that old Joe from the woods had loaned them. We're going to put this money in the jar where you kept your savings. The bills are marked in a special way. If Becky really takes it, when she spends it in the village, everyone will be able to see the little marks. Richard examined the bills. And if she doesn't take it? Then you'll be right, and we'll leave forever, said Brandon. And if she takes it and we can prove it was her? Asked Carol. Then you'll have to accept that both I and Ethan were accused unjustly. Richard was thoughtful for a long moment. All right, we'll do this test. But if it doesn't work, Brandon, I never want to see you near my family again. Understood, Richard. Carol hugged Brandon again. Brandon, even if this whole story is true, why did you stay all these years without any word? Mother passed without seeing you again. She died with a broken heart. Brandon felt a deep pain in his chest. Carol, I regret every day not having come back sooner. But after a while, pride becomes a prison you can't escape from alone. And what changed now? Brandon looked at Ethan. Ethan appeared in my life. Seeing him go through the same injustice I went through made me realize we can't let pride destroy the family twice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. They placed the marked bills in the ceramic jar and positioned it in the same spot where it always was. Then the family organized themselves to keep watch in shifts. Brandon, you can stay here at the house during the day, offered Carol. It's been 15 years since you've had a hot shower or slept in a real bed. Brandon looked at Richard, waiting for approval. You can stay, grumbled his brother, but only until we resolve this situation. During the day, Brandon took his first hot shower in 15 years. Carol set aside some of her husband's old clothes for him to wear. When he came out of the shower, shaved and in clean clothes, he looked like a completely different person. Uncle Brandon, exclaimed Ethan, you look like a normal person. Thank you, Ethan. I feel like a normal person for the first time in a long while. Carol was moved to see her brother-in-law clean and tidy. Brandon, you look like the boy I met 20 years ago. It's strange to look in the mirror and recognize myself again, Carol. During the afternoon, Brandon helped Richard fix a few things around the house. They worked in silence, but you could feel the tension slowly easing. Brandon, said Richard after a while, even if you prove your innocence, why did you never send any word all these years? Because I was very angry, Richard, and very hurt. You think I wasn't angry too? You think it was easy for me to accuse my own brother? No, I know it wasn't easy. But you accused me anyway. Because all the evidence pointed to you, Brandon. Only you knew where the money was hidden. And you never suspected anyone else? Who else would I suspect? It was just you and me in the house back then. Brandon stopped working and looked at his brother. Richard, what if someone had been watching us? What if someone had found out where the money was hidden? Who? I don't know. A neighbor. Someone who had access to our house. Richard became thoughtful. Back then, the only person who had access to our house was Linda, Becky's mother. That's true, she was always very close with our mother. She came here almost every day. And she could have seen where the money was hidden. But Linda would never do something like that, Brandon. I'm not saying it was Linda, but she might have mentioned it to someone, or someone might have overheard a conversation. Richard began to understand his brother's reasoning. You think Becky knew about the money since back then? It's possible, and if it's true, that would explain both the robbery 15 years ago and the one now. My God, Brandon, if that's the case, I destroyed our family for nothing. We don't know if it's true yet, Richard. Let's wait and see what happens. During the night, they took turns on watch. Brandon took the first shift from 8 to 10. Richard took from 10 to midnight. Carol from midnight to 2, and Ethan from 2 to 4 in the morning. During Brandon's shift, nothing happened. He watched the neighbor's house but saw no unusual movement. During Richard's shift, also nothing. The brother began to grow impatient, thinking that maybe Brandon and Ethan had made the whole story up. It was during Carol's shift that things started to get interesting. At 2:30 in the morning, she saw a shadow moving in Linda's backyard. She quickly woke Brandon. "Brandon, there's someone messing around in Linda's backyard." Brandon got up quickly and went to the window. He could see Becky silently leaving the house. "It's her," he whispered. "Wake up Richard and Ethan, but do it quietly." Within a few minutes, the entire family was awake, watching through the window cracks. Becky approached their house very carefully, looking all around. She took the spare key from under the flower pot and entered silently. "She's really going in," murmured Richard, impressed. "Now we wait," said Brandon. "Let's see if she takes the money." 5 minutes later, Becky hurried out of the house, putting something in her blouse pocket. "She took it," whispered Ethan. "She took the money." "Easy," said Brandon. "We can't be sure yet. Let's wait until tomorrow and see if she spends the marked money." "Brandon," said Richard with emotion in his voice, "it seems like you and Ethan were telling the truth." "Seems so, bro." It was the first time in 15 years that Richard had called Brandon bro. The next morning, Carol went to the market to do the week's shopping. Her mission was to see if Becky would show up there and try to buy something. Around 10 o'clock, Carol returned home very agitated. "Brandon! Richard!" She showed up at the market. "And?" the two asked at the same time. "She bought cigarettes and soda with one of the marked bills. Mr. John from the market even commented that he thought the bill looked a bit strange." Brandon and Richard looked at each other. "Now we have proof," said Brandon. "Let's go to Linda's house to talk to them," decided Richard. "I'm coming too," said Ethan. "No, Ethan. You'd better stay here with your mother. This could get complicated." Brandon, Richard, and Carol went to the neighbor's house. When Linda opened the door, she was startled to see Brandon. "My God! Brandon! Is it really you?" "Hi, Linda. Where have you been all these years?" "It's a long story, Linda. But right now we need to talk about something serious." "What is it?" "About your daughter, Becky." Linda's face immediately closed off. "What about my daughter?" "Linda, may I come in?" "It's better we talk inside." They entered the simple living room and sat down. "Linda," began Richard, "last night we saw your daughter entering our house. That's impossible. Becky slept all night." "Linda, we saw it with our own eyes," insisted Carol, "and today she spent marked money at the market." "Marked money? What is this story?" Brandon explained the whole situation, from the moment he found Ethan in the cave to the trap with the marked money. "You're making all this up to hurt my daughter," protested Linda. "Linda, we can prove it. Mr. John from the market still has the bill she used to buy cigarettes." At that moment, Becky appeared in the living room. "What's going on here, Mom?" "Becky," said Brandon, "we need to talk to you about the money you took from our house." "What money? I didn't take any money." "Becky, we saw you entering our house last night," said Richard. "You're lying." "And you bought cigarettes and soda this morning with a marked bill that was in our house," added Carol. Becky's face began to turn red. "That doesn't prove anything." "Becky," Brandon stood up, "you're 19 years old. You're a grown woman. You'd better tell the truth now, because this situation could get very serious." "What truth? I didn't do anything." "Becky, you took the money from our family last night, and before that you had taken it other times, including 2 days ago when they accused Ethan." Becky looked at her mother, seeking support, but Linda was clearly shaken by the accusations. "Becky, honey, tell me this isn't true," begged Linda. "Mum, they're making all this up." "Then how do you explain the marked money?" asked Richard. "What marked money?" Brandon showed one of the leftover bills with the special little marks. "This kind of marking, Becky. Very subtle, but very visible to those who know where to look." "So?" "Lots of people could have this kind of bill." "Becky, let's go to the market right now, and you explain to Mr. John where you got a bill just like this to buy cigarettes this morning." The young woman began to sweat. Becky, honey, for God's sake, tell me the truth, implored Linda, with tears in her eyes. That's when Becky broke down. Okay, I took the money, but only because I needed it. Needed it for what? Asked her mother. To pay off some debts I made. What kind of debts, Becky? Insisted Richard. I've been gambling, playing cards with some people from town. My daughter. Linda put her hands to her head. Since when? For about 2 years. At first I was winning, but then I started losing, and when you lose, you have to pay. And so you robbed our family? Asked Carol. I didn't want to, but I knew you always had some money saved, and I thought you wouldn't miss it. Becky, Brandon stepped closer, and 15 years ago, did you also take money from our family? The young woman shrank back. 15 years ago I was only 4 years old. But you might have overheard conversations. You might have seen where the money was hidden. I don't remember. Linda began to cry. Becky, you didn't just go to their house. You messed with my money too, didn't you? That's why there's been so little left for groceries. Mom. Answer, Becky. It was just a little, Mom. I always put it back later. How were you going to put it back if you only lost at gambling? Asked Richard. I thought I'd win it all back one day. Brandon shook his head, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief at finally discovering the truth, sadness at seeing a young woman destroying her life and the lives of others. Becky, 15 years ago, when the money from our father's inheritance disappeared, was it you who took it? No, I was too little. But you might have told someone where you saw the money hidden. Becky was silent for a long time, then she began to cry. I remember seeing you two hiding something in the backyard. I was little, but I found it interesting. I told my mum. You told Linda? Asked Richard. I did. I said I saw you burying a can. Linda turned pale. My God. Becky. So, Linda? Asked Brandon. Do you remember that conversation? I might have mentioned it to someone. I don't remember. Who did you mention it to? Maybe to little Joe. He was always around our house back then. Little Joe? Brandon remembered the man. The one who had problems with drinking. That's the one. He was a sort of relative of mine, stayed here from time to time. And where is he now? He left about 10 years ago. They say he went to Chicago. Brandon and Richard looked at each other. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. So that's how it was, said Brandon. Becky saw where we hid the money, told you. You mentioned it to little Joe and he stole it. And I accused you, said Richard, his voice choked. My own brother. Richard, you had no way of knowing. The evidence really did point to me. But I should have investigated better. I should have trusted you. Brandon stepped closer to his brother and put a hand on his shoulder. The important thing is that now we know the truth. Brandon, can you forgive me? Richard, you are my brother. Of course I forgive you. The two hugged for the first time in 15 years, while Carol cried with emotion. And now? Asked Linda. What's going to happen to Becky? Linda, your daughter needs help, said Brandon. She's addicted to gambling, and that won't stop on its own. I know, but I don't have money to pay for treatment. We'll help, said Carol. We're all neighbors. We're all family. Becky needs to stop gambling and she needs to pay back what she took from both families, said Richard. How is she going to pay? Asked Linda. She can work for us, suggested Brandon. Do cleaning, cooking, help with chores. That way she'll learn responsibility and pay back what she owes. And she needs to stay away from the people who encourage gambling, added Carol. Becky, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. I want to stop. I know I'm doing something wrong, but it's hard to quit. Nobody said it would be easy, Becky, said Brandon, but with help and willpower, you can do it. You're really going to help me? After everything I did? Becky, everyone deserves a second chance, said Carol, especially when the person admits they were wrong and wants to change. But you'll have to really put in the effort, warned Richard. No lying, no hiding things. Everything in honesty. "I promise," said Becky with tears in her eyes. "I promise I'll change." When they returned home, they found Ethan anxiously waiting for news. "So?" asked the boy. "Did it work?" "It worked, yes," said Brandon, hugging his nephew. "Your innocence was proven and mine too." "Yay," celebrated Ethan. "Now we can be a family again." "That's right, son," said Richard, hugging his son. "Dad apologizes for doubting you." "I forgive you, Dad, but don't do it again, okay?" "I promise I won't." "And is Uncle Brandon going to stay here with us?" Brandon looked at Richard and Carol, waiting for an answer. "Of course he is," said Carol. "This has always been his home." "Brandon," said Richard, "I know 15 years can't be erased just like that, but do you want to start over?" "I do, bro, but it'll take some time for us to get used to each other again. All the time it takes." That night, for the first time in 15 years, Brandon slept in a real bed, in a warm house, surrounded by family. But he couldn't sleep well. He was too accustomed to the silence of the cave. The next morning, Carol made a special breakfast to celebrate the family reunion. "Brandon, are you going to stay here for good?" she asked. "I don't know yet, Carol. 15 years of solitude leave marks. I'll need to readjust little by little." "Do you want to go back to the cave?" asked Ethan, worried. "Not to live, Ethan. But I want to keep going there. That cave was my home for a long time. I'm fond of that place." "Can I go with you?" "Sure you can. I can teach you other things about survival in nature." "Cool, I'll be like a scout." Brandon laughed. That boy's joy was contagious. "Brandon," said Richard, "do you want to come back to work in the workshop with me? I don't know if I remember how to fix carts and tools. It's like riding a bike. Once you learn, you never forget." "Maybe, but I want to do other things too." "What kind of things?" "I want to teach the things I learned in nature, medicinal plants, survival, those kinds of things." "You could give lessons?" asked Carol. "I can try. Old Joe from the woods said there are a lot of people interested in learning that sort of thing." "It would be a good source of income," agreed Richard. In the following days, Brandon began to readjust to family life. It wasn't easy. After so many years alone, even simple conversations seemed complicated. Becky started working for the two families, keeping her promise to pay back what she had stolen. At first, she was embarrassed, but little by little she fit in and even became friends with Ethan. "Ethan," she said one day, "you were very brave to leave home to discover the truth." "I wasn't brave, I was scared." "But even scared, you faced the situation. That's courage." "Uncle Brandon taught me that. He said courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you're afraid." "Your uncle is very wise." "He is. He knows a lot of interesting things." A week after the reconciliation, Brandon had a surprise. Old Joe from the woods showed up in the village, accompanied by a woman Brandon didn't recognize immediately. "Brandon," called Old Joe, "brought a visitor for you." When the woman approached, Brandon felt his heart race. It was Mary Catherine, his old love. "Hi, Brandon," she said timidly. "Mary? My God, is it really you?" "Yes, it's me." "But how... what are you doing here?" "Old Joe told me you had come back home. I wanted to see you." Brandon was speechless. Mary Catherine looked more mature with a few grey hairs, but she was still beautiful. I never expected to see you again." "Me neither. But when I heard your story, that you were exonerated after all these years, I wanted to come here to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For not believing in you back then, for ending our relationship when you needed support the most." Brandon was moved. "Mary, you don't have to apologize. Back then, all the evidence was against me. It was natural for you to doubt. But even so, I should have trusted the man I loved." You said loved in the past," Mary smiled. "Brandon, do you think 15 years can erase a true love?" "I don't know. 15 years is a long time." "It is a long time, yes, but it's also enough time for us to realize what really matters in life." "And what matters, Mary?" "Love, family, forgiveness. The simple things that make life worth living." Brandon looked at her, still not believing she was there. Mary, you want to try again? Yes, I do, Brandon, if you want to too. Of course I want to. I never stopped thinking about you. They embraced, while old Joe watched, moved, and Ethan clapped. Uncle Brandon, is she going to be my aunt now? Easy, Ethan, laughed Brandon. Let's take it slow. But you're going to date again, right? Yes, we are, said Mary, stroking the boy's hair. That afternoon, the whole village learned that Brandon had returned and that his innocence had been proven. Many people came to visit him to apologize for having believed the accusations. Brandon, said Mr. John from the market, I always suspected there was something wrong with that story. You were always an honest boy. Thank you, Mr. John, but I don't hold a grudge against anyone. You are a better man than I am, said Mrs. Margaret, who lived down the street. If I were in your place, I'd be very angry. Mrs. Margaret, anger only hurts the one who feels it. I prefer to keep space in my heart only for good things. That night the family gathered for dinner. It was the first time in 15 years they were all together at the table. Brandon, said Carol, I want to make a toast. A toast to what? To the family reunited, to truths uncovered, and to second chances. And to Ethan, added Brandon. If it weren't for him, I'd still be hiding in the cave. And to Uncle Brandon's courage, said Ethan. Who had the courage to come back home? And to forgiveness, said Richard, which is the hardest and most important thing in the world. They toasted with cashew juice, laughing and talking as if the 15 years of separation had been just a bad nightmare. Uncle Brandon, Ethan asked before going to sleep, are you happy? Very happy, my boy. Happier than I remember being in a long time. And you're not leaving again? I'm not leaving again, Ethan. My place is here, with you all. That's great. Now I have a real uncle. And I have a real nephew, a very brave and smart nephew. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following weeks, Brandon began teaching classes about medicinal plants and wilderness survival. The news spread quickly, and people from several neighboring villages came to learn from him. Uncle Brandon, you're getting famous, Ethan joked. It's not fame, Ethan. It's just shared knowledge. Knowledge only has value when it's passed on. Can you teach me how to teach too? Yes, I can. You can be my assistant. Cool. I'll help you with the classes. Becky also transformed during this period. She completely stopped gambling and dedicated herself to work and studies. Brandon helped her enroll in an adult literacy course. Mr. Brandon, she said one day, thank you for not turning me over to the authorities. Becky, everyone deserves a chance to start over. The important thing is that you don't waste that chance. I won't waste it, I promise. And how are things with your mother? Better. We're talking more, understanding each other better. She's helping me become a better person. Mary Catherine also moved back to the village and truly rekindled her romance with Brandon. They spent hours talking, making up for the 15 lost years. Brandon, she said one day, you've changed a lot. Changed how? You've become wiser, more patient, more understanding. Solitude teaches you many things, Mary. Some good, some bad. And did you learn more good things or bad things? In the end, I think more good. I learned to value what really matters. What really matters, Brandon? Family, love, forgiveness, and the chance to start anew each day. One day, Brandon was teaching about medicinal plants to a group of people when Ethan came running. Uncle Brandon, come see something. What is it, Ethan? Becky is feeling sick. Brandon dismissed the group and ran after Ethan to the neighbor's house. He found Becky passed out in the backyard, with Linda desperate. Brandon, thank God you came. Becky fainted out of nowhere. Brandon knelt beside Becky and checked her vital signs. She was conscious but very pale and nauseous. How long has she been like this? It started this morning. First nausea, then dizziness, now fainting. Brandon observed the symptoms and asked a few questions. Becky, are your periods late? The young woman blushed. Yes, I am. It's been almost 2 months. My daughter, exclaimed Linda. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid to say anything. Afraid of what? afraid of your reaction. Brandon and Linda exchanged glances. Becky, do you think you might be expecting a baby? Brandon asked gently. I think so, she whispered. And the father? It's Tony, from the city market. We've been dating in secret for a few months. Why in secret? Asked Linda. Because I thought you wouldn't like him. Honey, I just want you to be happy. If you like him and he likes you, why wouldn't I like him? Because he's poor, Mom. He has no education, no money. Becky, look around. We're poor too, and we don't have an education either. What matters is if he's hard-working and treats you well. He treats me very well, Mum. He's a good man. Then that's what matters. Brandon smiled, seeing how family relationships were slowly healing. Becky, you need to go to the doctor to confirm and start prenatal care. But Uncle Brandon, I don't have money for a doctor. We'll figure it out. Health is not the place to cut corners. That afternoon, Brandon spoke with Richard about Becky's situation. Richard, I think we should help the girl with the medical appointments. I agree, Brandon. She's doing her part, working and behaving right. It's fair that we help. And if there really is a baby on the way, she'll need even more help. Babies bring joy to the whole family. We'll help however we can. When Becky learned that the two families would help with the medical expenses, she began to cry. Why are you all so good to me, after everything I did? Becky, said Carol, when you make a mistake and own up to it, when you change and try to be better, you deserve support. But I stole from you all. And you're paying it back, with hard work and dedication, said Brandon. That proves you've really changed. Besides, added Richard, if there's a baby on the way, it's not just your problem. A baby is a joy for the whole community. Becky hugged each of them, promising she would be the best mother possible. And what about Tony? Asked Brandon. When are you going to tell him? Tonight. He's picking me up so we can go for a walk. And do you think he'll be happy? I think so. He always says he wants to have a family. Then everything will work out. That night, Tony was indeed happy with the news and asked Becky to marry him right then. Becky, I love you so much. I want to marry you and start a family. But Tony, we don't have money for a wedding. We don't need a big party. What matters is that we stay together and take care of our child. Are you sure? Absolutely. Will you marry me? Yes, I will. The next day, the couple announced their decision to their families, who were overjoyed. How wonderful, celebrated Linda. My daughter is finally going to have a real family. And we're going to have a child to bring joy to the house, said Carol. Uncle Brandon, asked Ethan, when they get married, will the party be at our house? If they want, it can be. Cool. I've never been to a wedding. Brandon smiled. He was amazed at how life can take unexpected turns. A few weeks ago, he was alone in a cave. Now he was surrounded by family, love, and new plans. Brandon, Mary Catherine said that night, are you happy with everything that's happening? Very happy. Sometimes it feels like all this is a dream. It's not a dream, it's real life. It's the life we deserve. Mary, do you think we could also think about marriage? I think so. After all, we've already lost 15 years. It's not worth wasting any more time. That's true, life is meant to be lived. Brandon, do you want to ask me to marry you? Brandon laughed. Yes, I do. Mary Catherine, will you marry me? Yes, Brandon Mitchell Thompson, I really do. They kissed, while Ethan spied through the window and smiled. Preparations for the two weddings began immediately. It would be a double celebration, saving costs and multiplying the joy. Uncle Brandon, said Ethan, now we're going to have two parties in one. That's right. And you're going to be the ring bearer for both weddings. What's a ring bearer? It's the one who carries the rings to the altar. Cool. I'm going to be the most important ring bearer in New Mexico. During the preparations, the whole community got involved. Each family contributed something to the celebration. Old Joe from the woods offered a steer for the barbecue. Mrs. Margaret made the cake. Mr. John from the market donated soda and beer. Everyone wanted to be part of the celebration. Brandon, said Richard, our family has never had so much happiness all at once. It's true. It's as if the 15 lost years were made up for with a lot of concentrated love. And the best part is that now our family is going to grow even more. How so? With your wedding, Becky's wedding, the baby that's coming, the house is going to be full of life. Yeah, the house really is going to get small. We can figure out a way to expand it, add some rooms. Good idea. I can help with the construction. Of course. After 15 years surviving in a cave, you must know how to build anything. Brandon laughed. It was true. He had learned many practical skills during his time in isolation. The week before the wedding, Brandon decided to pay one last visit to the cave. Ethan, do you want to come with me? Yes. Can I bring my friends to show them where you lived? Yes, you can. They climbed the familiar trail, accompanied by 3 of Ethan's little friends. The children were impressed by the cave and all the adaptations Brandon had made. Uncle Brandon, how did you manage to bathe here? With cold water from the creek, Ethan. At first it was terrible, but I got used to it. And when it was cold, I'd make a fire and warm up the cave. And when you missed your family? That question caught Brandon by surprise. He turned to Ethan with misty eyes. When I missed them, Ethan, I'd come here to the cave entrance, look toward the village, and imagine how you all were doing. Did you think about me before you knew me? I did. I knew you existed. I knew you were my nephew. I always wanted to meet you. And why didn't you come meet me before? Because pride is a very stubborn beast, my boy. It locks you in a cage and won't let you out. But now you're out of the cage. I am. And do you know who helped me get out? Who? You, Ethan. You were the key that opened the cage. Ethan smiled and hugged his uncle. So I'm like a hero? Yes, my boy. You are my hero. They gathered the last personal belongings Brandon wanted to keep and said goodbye to the cave. Uncle Brandon, are you going to miss this place? I will. This place was my home for 15 years. But now I have a better home. Which one? Where there's family, Ethan. Home is where there's family. Then our home is the best home in the world. Yes, my boy. It is the best home in the world. On the wedding day, the whole village gathered in the small church downtown. Father Joseph, who had baptized Brandon as a child, officiated the double ceremony. My dear children, said the priest, today we celebrate not just 2 weddings, but the reunion of a family and the strength of forgiveness. Brandon was emotional, wearing a suit borrowed from old Joe from the woods. Mary wore a simple but beautiful dress that had belonged to her mother. Becky was radiant with a little belly that was just starting to show. Tony couldn't stop smiling, proud of his wife and the baby on the way. Brandon Mitchell Thompson, asked the priest, do you take Mary Catherine to be your wife, to love, respect, and care for in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, until life parts you? I do, Father, replied Brandon with a firm voice. Mary Catherine, do you take Brandon Mitchell Thompson to be your husband, to love, respect, and care for in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, until life parts you? I do, Father, replied Mary with tears of happiness. Tony Parker Wilson, do you take Becky Linda Anderson to be your wife? I do. Tony didn't even let the priest finish, making everyone laugh. To love, respect, and care for, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, until life parts you. I absolutely do, repeated Tony, even more excited. Becky Linda Anderson, do you take Tony Parker Wilson to be your husband, to love, respect, and care for, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, until life parts you? I do, with all my heart, said Becky. Then, by the authority granted to me by God and the Church, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Brandon, you may kiss the bride. Tony, you may kiss the bride. The church erupted in applause. Ethan, who had carried the rings without dropping a single one, clapped enthusiastically. Uncle Brandon, we did it. Now we are a complete family. We did, Ethan. We are a complete and happy family. The reception was held in the family's backyard, which had been decorated with flowers and colorful streamers. Mr. Harold's barbecue was perfect. Mrs. Margaret's cake was delicious, and the music played late into the night. Brandon, said Richard during the party, I wanted to make a speech. Go ahead, brother. Richard climbed onto a chair to be taller and asked for everyone's attention. Everyone, I wanted to say a few words about my brother Brandon. The party fell silent, everyone paying attention. 15 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I accused my own brother of something he didn't do. Out of pride and haste, I destroyed our family. Richard paused, emotional. Brandon spent 15 years alone in a cave because of my accusations. 15 years without family, without love, without a home. And do you know what he did when we discovered the truth? What? Shouted someone from the crowd. He forgave me, without resentment, without demands. He just forgave me and came back home. Brandon is a man of God, shouted old Joe from the woods. Yes, he is, continued Richard. And today, seeing him marry Mary, seeing Becky start her life over, seeing my son Ethan so happy, I realize that sometimes we need to lose everything to learn what really matters. And what matters? Asked someone. Family, love, and forgiveness. Those are the only things that really matter in life. Everyone applauded, moved. Brandon stood up and hugged his brother. Thank you, Richard, for those words and for taking me back. Thank you, Brandon, for teaching me what true forgiveness is. The party continued until dawn. When they finally finished cleaning everything, the sun was already rising on the horizon. What a great party, said Ethan, tired but happy. It was the best party of my life, agreed Brandon. Uncle Brandon, now that you're married, how's it going to be? How do you mean, Ethan? Where are you going to live? Brandon looked at Mary, who smiled. We talked about it, said Mary. We're going to live right here, in this house. Family has to stay together. Yay, celebrated Ethan. Now I have an uncle and aunt living with me. And soon you'll have a little cousin too, reminded Becky, caressing her belly. That's right. Our family is going to grow even more. Brandon looked around, seeing all those people he loved gathered in a simple but love-filled house. He thought about the 15 years he spent alone in the cave, wondering if it was worth taking so long to return. But then he concluded that every experience in life has its purpose. The 15 years of solitude had taught him to value family, forgiveness, and the simple moments of happiness. Brandon, said Carol, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how mysterious life is, Carol, how sometimes we need to get completely lost to truly find ourselves. That's true, and sometimes we need to suffer a lot to learn to value happiness. Exactly, and sometimes we need to spend 15 years in a cave to discover that our place is at home, with family. Uncle Brandon, said Ethan, approaching, do you regret going to live in the cave? Brandon thought for a moment. You know, Ethan, I regret leaving without fighting for my innocence. But I don't regret going through everything I went through because it taught me important things. What kind of things? It taught me to value every conversation, every hug, every family meal. It taught me that pride is worth nothing compared to love. And it taught me that it's never too late to start over. You are very wise, Uncle Brandon. I'm not wise, Ethan. I'm just someone who learned from my own mistakes. And what do you want to do now? I want to live each day as if it were a gift, Ethan. I want to enjoy every moment with you all. I want to teach other people the things I learned, and I want to see you grow up and be happy. I want that too, Uncle Brandon. So let's make a deal. What deal? Let's promise that we will never again let pride and hurt separate our family. I promise. And let's promise that we will always talk about our problems instead of jumping to conclusions. I promise that too. And let's promise that we will always value the time we have together. That's an easy promise to make. Brandon hugged his nephew, feeling immense gratitude for that brave boy who had changed his life forever. In the following months, the family's life settled into a happy and peaceful rhythm. Brandon continued teaching classes on medicinal plants and survival. Mary opened a small home bakery, Richard expanded the workshop, and Carol took care of everyone with her affectionate way. Becky and Tony moved into a small room built in the back of Linda's house, but spent most of their time at the Mitchell-Thompson family home. Becky's baby was born on a sunny December day, a beautiful girl who was named Hope. Why did you choose that name? Asked Ethan, holding his little cousin in his arms. Because this girl represents the hope of a new life for our family, explained Becky. And because it was the hope of discovering the truth that brought your uncle back, added Tony. Brandon was emotional as he held his honorary granddaughter in his arms. It was incredible how such a tiny child could bring so much joy to a home. Hope, he murmured. You will grow up in a family that learned the value of forgiveness and love. The little girl opened her eyes and seemed to smile at him. Look, Uncle Brandon, exclaimed Ethan. She already likes you. And I already like her very much too. Mary, who had become a second mother to Ethan, was radiant with the child's arrival. Brandon, wouldn't it be beautiful if we also had children? It would be wonderful, Mary, but if we don't, we are already very blessed with Ethan and now with Hope. That's true. Family isn't just those born from our blood, it's those we choose to love. Exactly. And we have many people to love in this house. On the first anniversary of Brandon's return, the family organized a special party. They invited all the people who had helped in the reconciliation, old Joe from the woods, Mr. John from the market, Father Joseph, in short, the whole community. Brandon, said Father Joseph during the party, your story is proof that God does not abandon his children. Even when all seems lost, there is always a chance to start over. Thank you, Father. I learned that through experience. And now you are helping other people learn it too through your classes and your example. It's the least I can do. Knowledge and experience only have value when they are shared. Old Joe from the woods approached the two. Brandon, do you remember the first time we met at the farm? You were skinny, bearded, looking like a wild animal. Yes, I remember, and you treated me with kindness anyway. Do you know why I did that? Why? Because I was also kicked out of home when I was young. I also spent years alone, feeling anger and resentment, and I know how hard it is to come back. Really? Brandon was surprised. You never told me that. Because some pains we only share when the person is ready to hear, and now you are ready. What happened to you? My father kicked me out because he thought I had gotten the neighbor's daughter pregnant. I spent 10 years away from my family, until the truth came out and they discovered the child's father was someone else. And you went back? I went back. But my father had already passed when I arrived. I could never ask for his forgiveness, nor he mine. How sad. That's why I always insisted you go back home, Brandon, because I know what it's like to lose that chance forever. Brandon was moved by his old friend's revelation. Thank you, old Joe, for everything, for helping me survive, for encouraging me to return, for lending the money for the trap. Brandon, you don't have to thank me. We help each other because we are all part of the same human family. Ethan, who had been listening to the conversation, approached. Old Joe, were you also kicked out of home like Uncle Brandon? Yes, I was, son. That's why I knew your uncle was innocent. Someone who really steals doesn't spend 15 years suffering in a cave. Whoever steals runs far away and tries to forget what they did. So you're like an expert on people kicked out of home? Old Joe laughed. You could say so, Ethan. And I can guarantee one thing, whoever returns is always better than the one who left. Why? Because suffering teaches, loneliness teaches, longing teaches, and when the person returns, they bring all that wisdom with them. Just like Uncle Brandon. Exactly. Your uncle came back much wiser and more understanding than he was when he left. Brandon listened to the conversation with a smile. It was true. He had become a better person through the pain. Ethan, he said, do you know the best thing I learned in these 15 years? What? That happiness isn't in the big things, it's in the small things. In a conversation, a hug, a family meal, a smile. Like at a party like this. Like at a party like this. 2 years ago, I didn't even dream I could be as happy as I am today. And I didn't even dream I could have such a cool uncle. And I didn't dream I could have such a brave and smart nephew. They hugged as the party continued around them. That night, after all the guests had left and the house was silent, Brandon went out to the backyard and looked toward the mountains, where the cave was. What are you thinking about? Asked Mary, approaching. I'm thinking about the cave, if there's someone there alone going through what I went through. Do you want to go check? I do. Tomorrow, I'll take a little trip there. Can I come along? Of course. I want to show you where I lived all those years. It must be strange to go back there. It must be. But I think it's important to make peace with that place. The next day, Brandon and Mary climbed up to the cave. To Brandon's surprise, there were signs that someone had been there recently. "Brandon, look at this," said Mary, pointing to food scraps and campfire ashes. "Someone's using the cave," noted Brandon. "Do you think there's someone in need here?" "Could be. Let's leave a note and some provisions, in case the person returns." Brandon wrote a note explaining who he was and offering help. He left some fruit, water, and a blanket alongside it. "If there's someone needing help," he wrote in the note, "you can look for me in the village. My name is Brandon Mitchell Thompson. I also lived in this cave and I know how hard it is. You don't have to go through this alone." 3 days later, a young man of about 20 years old knocked on the family's door. "Are you Brandon Mitchell Thompson?" "Yes, I am. Who are you?" "My name is Charles. I found your note in the cave." Brandon invited the young man inside. He was thin, dirty, and wearing torn clothes. "How long have you been living in the cave, Charles?" "About 2 months. I left my town because some bad things happened." "What kind of things?" "My father kicked me out of the house, said I had stolen money from him, but I hadn't stolen anything." Brandon and Richard exchanged a look. It was incredible how history repeated itself. "Charles," said Brandon, "do you want to tell us what really happened?" The young man broke down in tears and told his whole story. It was practically identical to Brandon's: accusation of theft, expulsion from home, isolation. "Well," said Brandon after hearing everything, "it seems you've ended up in the right place." "How so?" "Because I went through exactly the same thing as you. And I found out that when you're in the right, sooner or later the truth comes out." "You really believe me?" "Yes, I do. And we're going to help you prove your innocence, the same way they helped me prove mine." "How?" "First, you're going to take a bath, eat a decent meal, and sleep in a bed. Then we'll talk about a plan to find out who really robbed your family. You would do that for me?" "Of course we will," said Carol. "No one deserves to go through what you're going through. And how do you know I'm not lying?" "Because," said Brandon, "someone who really steals doesn't spend 2 months alone in a cave. Someone who steals runs far away and tries to forget what they did. Someone who stays suffering near home is because their conscience is clear." Charles began to cry again, but now they were tears of relief. Thank you so much. It's been so long since anyone believed in me." "Charles," said Ethan, who had followed the whole conversation, "Uncle Brandon is going to teach you how to find the truth. He's an expert at it." "Really?" "Yes. He helped find out who robbed our family, and now he's going to help you too." Brandon smiled. It seemed his mission in life was becoming clear: to help people who had been falsely accused. "Charles, tomorrow we'll start the investigation, but today you rest and eat." "Okay, but can I ask a question?" "Of course." "Why are you being so good to me? You don't even know me." "Because," answered Brandon, "when you go through a hardship and manage to overcome it, the obligation is to help other people going through the same thing." "It's true," agreed Richard. "Suffering only has meaning if it serves to help someone." Charles stayed at the family's house for 2 weeks. During that time, Brandon helped him investigate who had really stolen the money from his family. Using the same techniques that had worked with Becky, they discovered the real culprit was a cousin of Charles who had gambling and drug addictions. "Charles," said Brandon on the day they discovered the truth, "now you have 2 options." "What are they?" "You can go back home and tell your father everything, or you can choose to start a new life here." "I want to go back home," decided Charles. "I want my father to know the truth." "Then that's what we'll do. Tomorrow I'll go with you to talk to him." "You would do that?" "Of course. The same way old Joe from the woods helped me, I'm going to help you." The trip to Charles's town took a whole day. When they arrived at the young man's father's house, the reception was cold. "Charles, what are you doing here? And who is this man?" "Hi, Dad. This is Brandon. He helped me find out who really stole the money." "Oh, really? And who was it?" "It was cousin Joey Paul. He's addicted to gambling and drugs, and he was the one who took the money." "That's a lie. Joey Paul is a hard-working boy." "Dad, we can prove it. Brandon taught me how to investigate. Brandon then told the whole story of his own life, how he was falsely accused and how he discovered the truth 15 years later. "Mr. Charles," said Brandon at the end, "I know how you feel. I accused my brother in the same way, but we need to investigate before drawing conclusions. And how are you going to prove it was Joey Paul?" Brandon smiled and showed the same techniques he had used with Becky: marked money, observation, patience. In 3 days, they managed to catch Joey Paul trying to steal more money from the house. When confronted, he confessed to everything. "Charles," said the father with tears in his eyes, "forgive me, my son. Forgive me for doubting you." "I forgive you, Dad. What's important is that now we know the truth." "How did you manage to stay strong during these months?" "Brandon taught me that innocence always comes to light, sooner or later." "Brandon," said Charles's father, "how can I thank you for what you did for my son?" "No need to thank me. You just need to believe in your son more from now on." "And Joey Paul? What are we going to do with him?" "We're going to help him too," said Charles. "Addiction is a disease. He needs treatment, not punishment." Brandon smiled. Charles had learned the most important lesson: forgiveness. When they returned to the village, Charles wanted to stay a few more days to thank the family that had taken him in. "Brandon," he said on the last night, "you changed my life." "No, Charles. You're the one who changed your life. I just showed you the way. But if it weren't for you, I'd still be alone in the cave. And if it weren't for Ethan, I'd still be alone in the cave too. People come into our lives at the right time." "That's true, and now I want to do the same thing you do." "How so?" "I want to help people who have been falsely accused. I want them to know they're not alone." "Good idea, Charles. The world needs more people willing to help. Can you teach me the investigation techniques?" "Yes, I can. In fact, I'm thinking of formalizing these lessons." "What kind of lessons?" "Lessons on how to investigate, how to uncover the truth, how to deal with false accusations. It seems like a lot of people are going through similar problems." Ethan, who was listening to the conversation, got excited. "Uncle Brandon, you could become like a private detective." "Not exactly a detective, Ethan, more of a guide, someone who helps people defend themselves when they're falsely accused." "Cool. And I can be your assistant." "Yes, you can, Ethan. You've already proven you have a talent for investigation." "And can I help too?" asked Charles. "Of course. In fact, I think we're going to form a team." "What kind of team?" "A team of people who help others discover the truth. Each of us has been through false accusations, so we know exactly what it's like." Mary, who had followed the whole conversation, smiled. "Brandon, you're creating a life mission." "That's true. I think I've discovered my purpose." "What is it?" "To use my experience to help people going through what I went through, so they don't have to spend 15 years alone in a cave." "That's a beautiful mission, Brandon. And a necessary one. From what I'm seeing, there are a lot of people being falsely accused out there." In the following months, Brandon really formalized his work of helping people who were falsely accused. He set up a small office in his own home and began taking cases from various towns in the region. Ethan became his official assistant, helping with investigations and learning truth-finding techniques. Charles moved to the village and also became part of the team. "Uncle Brandon," Ethan said one day, "how many people have we helped?" "Let me see." Brandon counted on his fingers. "That's 12 cases just this month, and all resolved successfully." "That's great. We're saving whole families." "It's true, Ethan. Every person we help is a family that won't be torn apart because of lies. And the best part is we don't charge anything." "Exactly. Knowledge and experience shouldn't be charged for. They should be shared." Becky, who was now a dedicated mother and had completely stopped her addictions, also helped with the work. "Brandon," she said one day, "can I give an idea?" "Of course, Becky. We could teach other people to do what you do. That way every town could have its own team of people who help with false accusations." "Excellent idea," exclaimed Brandon. "We can offer courses and training. And that way we'll multiply our ability to help," agreed Charles. "Ethan, what do you think?" "I think it's amazing. We're going to become like a school of truth detectives." Brandon laughed. That boy's creativity never ceased to amaze him. Truth Detectives, I like the name. Really? Really? We'll use that name for our project. 2 years after Brandon's return, the School of Truth Detectives was already known throughout the region. People came from various towns to learn the techniques developed by Brandon and his team. "Brandon," Mary said one night, "are you proud of what you've built?" "I'm very proud, but also very grateful." "Grateful for what?" "For having gone through everything I went through. Because if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't have learned these things and I couldn't help so many people. It's amazing how suffering can turn into wisdom." "That's true. And how wisdom can turn into help for others." "Brandon, do you think it was worth it to have stayed 15 years in the cave?" Brandon thought for a long moment. "You know, Mary, I don't know if it was worth it to have stayed that long, but it was worth it to have gone through the experience. It was worth it to have learned the lessons. And most of all, it was worth it to have come back." "And what would you say to a person who is living now what you lived 15 years ago?" "I would say, don't give up. The truth always comes out. And when it does, you'll be ready to rebuild your life in an even better way. And if the person says they can't, I would say, you don't have to manage it alone. There's always someone willing to help. Sometimes it's a brave nephew. Sometimes it's a kind neighbor. Sometimes it's a stranger who's been through the same thing. But there's always someone." Ethan, who was now 11 years old and had become an excellent investigator, approached his uncles. "Uncle Brandon, can I ask a question?" "Of course, Ethan. Do you regret anything?" "I regret having taken so long to come back. I regret not having fought for my innocence from the start. And I regret having wasted so much time on pride and resentment. But if you hadn't stayed in the cave, would you have learned the things you teach today? Probably not. And if you hadn't learned those things, you wouldn't have helped so many people, right?" "That's true. So maybe it's not a reason for regret, maybe it's a reason for gratitude." Brandon looked at that 11-year-old boy who spoke with the wisdom of an adult. "Ethan, you're right. I shouldn't regret. I should be thankful." "Thankful for what?" "For having gone through everything that made me the person I am today. For having learned lessons I can teach to others. And most of all, for having found you, who taught me that courage has no age." "Uncle Brandon, can I tell you something?" "Sure." "When I was in the cave with you that first night, I was really scared. But then I realized that sometimes we need to face fear to discover important things." "What kind of things?" "That we are stronger than we think. That family is more important than pride, and that truth is stronger than lies." Brandon hugged his nephew with tears in his eyes. "Ethan, you saved more than my life. You saved my soul. And you saved our family, Uncle Brandon. We saved our family, Ethan, together." Mary and Carol, who had listened to the conversation, also came closer for a group hug. "What a beautiful family we are," said Carol. "The best family in the world," Mary agreed. "And now we are a family that helps other families," added Ethan. "Exactly," said Brandon, "and that's the best ending I could imagine for our story." Richard, who had arrived from the workshop, joined the hug. "Brandon, thank you for teaching me what real forgiveness is. Thank you for giving me the chance to come back home. We both learned, bro. I learned not to jump to conclusions, and you learned not to let pride push family away." "And I learned that a kid can also help solve adult problems," said Ethan. "And I learned that it's never too late to start over," said Becky, arriving with hope in her arms. "And I learned that family is who we choose to love," said Mary. "And I learned that home is where there's family," said Brandon. "And we all learned that the truth always wins," concluded Carol. 5 years after that day, Brandon's story became known throughout the state. His Truth Detectives School had already helped more than 300 families solve cases of wrongful accusations. Ethan, now 16, had become an exceptional investigator and planned to study law to become a defense lawyer for people wrongfully accused. Becky had become the coordinator of a rehabilitation program for people addicted to gambling. Hope, now 5 years old, was a cheerful child growing up hearing stories about the importance of truth and forgiveness. Charles had founded a branch of the school in his hometown and married a local teacher. They had 2 children and were very happy. Brandon and Mary never had biological children, but they considered Ethan, Hope, and all the young people who passed through the school as their children at heart. On a sunny Sunday, exactly 10 years after his return, Brandon was on the porch of his house watching the whole family gathered in the backyard. Ethan was playing with Hope, Richard was fixing a bicycle, Carol was tending to the plants, Mary was preparing lunch, Becky and Tony were talking about plans for the week. "What are you thinking about?" asked Mary, approaching. "I'm thinking every day of suffering in that cave was worth it." "Why?" "Because it brought me here, to this moment, to this family, to this life." "Are you happy, Brandon?" "Very happy, Mary. Happier than I ever imagined I could be." "And if you could go back in time and change something?" Brandon thought for a moment, watching all that happiness around him. "I wouldn't change a thing, because everything that happened, every mistake, every success, every tear, every smile, brought me here, and here is exactly where I want to be. With your family. With my family. Because family is the only treasure that really matters in life." Ethan approached, sweaty from playing. "Uncle Brandon, can we go visit the cave tomorrow? I want to show Hope where you lived." "Of course, Ethan. It's important for her to know our story." "Why is it important?" "Because our story teaches that no matter how lost you are, there's always a way back home. There's always a chance to start over, and there's always family waiting to welcome you with open arms." "Uncle Brandon?" "Yes, Ethan?" "I love you very much." "I love you very much too, my boy. You are my hero. And you are mine." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story about family, forgiveness, and second chances. Do you believe Brandon made the right choice by returning home? Which part of the story moved you the most? Leave your opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If you have any personal experience about family forgiveness or second chances, share it with us. We love reading your heartfelt stories. Don't forget to leave your like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving narratives like this one.